So then we started snogging up against the wall, and he had a bottle of beer in his hand, and he let go of the bottle of beer and it smashed behind me so that he could have both arms to embrace me. And I remember at the time thinking, isn't that lovely? He's just dropped his drink just so that we can snog better.
I am Kay Anderson, and you are listening to Lost Spaces, a podcast that mourns the death of queer nightlife. Every episode, I talk to a different person about a venue from their past, the memories they created there, and the people that they used to know. Marcus Hunter-Neill, also known as Lady Portia, is Northern Ireland's first lady of drag and has been charming audiences for the last 2 decades. And it all started when she, with 2 friends, formed their first drag troupe and convinced the owners of the Parliament in Belfast to let them take over the venue on a Sunday night.
What sometimes I find, and I don't identify as any religion really, but I was raised as a Protestant, and in Northern Ireland, there's a real arrogance around the Protestant faith. So if you're white, middle class and Protestant, then you are the shit in Northern Ireland. But I had a taint against me because I was gay, so I may as well have been a leper on the street. And that's how that one chink in your armor can, because in the Catholic Church, they really started to embrace it. And they were like, look at the south of Ireland. They were the first place to have a referendum. And 73% or something like that all came out to say, yes, let this happen. Even little rural places that you would never have thought all voted yes. So the Protestants had this real thing of, we have to keep everything so pure. And whenever you had that little sort of chink, then you're not deemed as good enough. But when you strip it back, the Protestant religion was only invented so Henry VIII could divorce a wife. So it's not even steeped in history. It was invented so a king set up his own religion. So one of the oldest recorded religions that is around is Hinduism. So the arrogance that when you get these politicians who are Protestant, they're holier than thou, and we're this and gays shouldn't do this, and abortion this and abortion that. You're going, right, well, you're basing this on the newest religion around, and you don't even acknowledge one that was around 3,000 years before yours even came to fruition. So what are you really talking about, and what's your basis? But again, it's that thing of, if you say that, like we had a health minister who went on record to say that dinosaurs were put on the earth to fool non-Christians, and that the evolution didn't exist, right? And that was our health minister at the time. Now, it was a few years ago, so it's not the current health minister. But that's what I'm saying. That's kind of what you're dealing with.
So just getting my head around this. So the fossils and the bones of dinosaurs were put there to test your faith. Is that what?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But he's not alone in that opinion. There are so many diehard Christians who, when you challenge them around evolution, and then they go, oh well, I mean, if we're evolved from monkeys, why are monkeys still not having humans? And you're like, so you don't quite get what evolution means. and then you talk about dinosaurs, and they go, yeah, they were planted by Satan because he lives in hell in the center of the earth. And you're like, like what? And then you just can't argue. You just at some point have to go,
yeah,
I can't even argue with this because
just
you're
actually
away. I know.
That's really odd.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, that's not.
And then even a good one, whenever they come out and they go, well, it was Adam and Eve, but actually it wasn't. It was Adam and Lilith.
Yeah,
and then
Lilith
had her own voice, and then they got rid of her very quickly and took Eve from Adam's rib, so she would be an exact match to him and bow down to him. So it wasn't Adam and Eve to begin with. And if we're all descendant from Adam and Eve, who had 2 boys, then where do the grandchildren come from? Except for the fact that one of the boys kills the other one and has sex with his own mother to produce more children. So if you go by that, we're all inbred. If you want to trace it right back to the early lineage, then we're all in. So
what was Lilith doing at this point, by the way?
Oh, I think she had gone down to hell because it was a bit more fun.
Oh, okay.
It was like, "Yous are born. Yous are born. I'm not allowed an opinion. I'm going back to Satan."
Yeah, I'm gonna make some fake bones to plant in the earth. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go and have a disco with the gays in hell. They haven't been invented yet, but don't worry, they're coming. I'm gonna create them.
Oh, the Bible is so trippy.
Yeah. But the thing is, so I wouldn't follow any one set religion, but my ethos in life is that if you strip back every single religion on earth, right? Basically, the long and short of it is, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Look after your fellow man. Do good in this life because it'll pay dividends in the next life. And basically, don't be a dick, right?
Yeah.
So I do that anyway. I have no fear of death because the way I look at it is, if I die tomorrow, all the religions can't be wrong. So because if you're saying that one is right and one is wrong, then they're saying the same about you. So they can't all be wrong. So if I die tomorrow and there is nothing, I'll not know any difference and I'll be dead. If I die tomorrow and I go to the other side, I have no fear. My life is pure and I've done nothing but help others and led a good life. And let he without sin cast the first stone. I judge nobody because I've been there, done that, and got several t-shirts.
So shall we talk about the t-shirt getting? The Parliament. Let's cast our minds back 20 odd years. When was the first time you went to the Parliament?
So I was trying to work this out. I'm 38 now. So I was 7. So I think around 1996, 7ish. I maybe stepped into the bar and walked around and walked out. Okay. I think 97. I did I was a bit longer in and had a walk around, and because obviously I was still at school, and I sort of sneaked out and just walked around. I was in this environment where there were all these gays and it was amazing, and and I was like, this is going to be my life very soon, and I just can't wait, because I had a terrible time at school. I was bullied really badly at school, so it was great to go somewhere where I was like, in like a few years time I can come here and and then know these gay people. So I was
also, so you went the first time you went, you were underage. You were underage. You went in, but you could. Why? How could you get in?
I just kind of snuck in and walked around, and then walked back out again because I was so scared.
Oh, okay. Oh, so just kind of okay, that's the bar, that's the toilet.
Yeah, I saw the rainbow flag, and I don't know if you ever watched a program called it was a French program. Oh my goodness, what did it used to be called? And it was a program with two French presenters, Eurotrash, and then and it was on Channel 4 on a Friday night, and then I'd watch it, and then that was my early introduction to gays and gay life and all that type of thing, because then I'd be watching that, and then I realized, I put together because you have to remember there was no internet, and it's not like a gay pamphlet drops through your door, so you're kind of having to piece together anything. So then I figured out gay flags, like the rainbow flag meant if that was outside a bar, that was a gay bar. And in the family car, we drove past this bar and I saw the rainbow flag and I was like, oh my God,
stop the car.
The gay bar. But obviously inwardly, because I wasn't vocalizing that. So I clocked it as the kind of where it was. And then I remember going up and trying to find it. I didn't know the town, so I got really lost, and I didn't know where it was, and I had to go home. And then another time I came across it, and that's when I went in, and I was like, But also at the same time, it was quite dangerous, and at that particular time, it wasn't, because I walked in it and I walked around, and then a few nights later, on the news, a policeman had been shot dead in it, because we were still in the Troubles. So the a gay policeman was there, and he was out to the people in there. But obviously, then there had been informants or something like that there, so they knew that he was going to be in this bar. So the IRA walked in and shot the policeman dead in the middle of the bar.
Oh wow!
And then walked back out again.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so it was a serious time. But the thing was, although that happened, the gays did very much slip onto the radar of the paramilitaries, because a lot of the time they didn't care whether you were Catholic or you were Protestant, or they didn't care whether you were gay. They just cared whether you were Catholic or Protestant. But because this guy was a policeman, then the paramilitaries, they just didn't care. They just shot him dead because he was a policeman, you know. And it was a very dangerous time, because I did an interview with the first policeman who was ever outed in the RUC, which was the Royal Ulster Constabulary, and he was outed, but he couldn't, and he had this awful time being out and gay, because he was kind of set up by other police and things like that there, and they were the ones that tried to out him. But because of the troubles and all of the paramilitary things that were going on, he was safer in the police, because if he left the protection of the police, even though he was getting such a hard time and it was a really terrible time for him, if he left the police, he wouldn't be able to get a job anywhere else, because he was an ex-policeman, so he would be a target. So other businesses then wouldn't want him involved, because he could bring a paramilitary person to come in and shoot up the office. So it was one of those things where it was a very brave thing to be out, and there's very few policemen were out, but that same policeman was the first one 25 years later who led the police march in Pride about 5 or 6 years ago. So he stayed in. He only retired because it got easier. Then it changed from the RUC, and the Ulster was taken out, and it was called the PSN, the Police Force of Northern Ireland. So then that became a whole new wave of Northern Ireland and Northern Ireland policing and minds and people's minds. So our police and our schools and our fire brigades and everything like that all changed. Our politics didn't change because they didn't want to change, but our police forces and everything else did.
Okay, so I mean, this is somewhat traumatic. So you had your first experience going into the bar, did a loop, then left, and then a few days later, someone got shot there.
Yes, and it was on the news. So what happened was, I was at home, and we were having tea in front of the television and watching the news, and I'm eating typical Northern Irish food, potatoes and meat, right? And there was the Parliament, and there was somebody had been shot dead, and then I got really frightened, because I was thinking, oh my God, imagine if I had been there, not even if I had been shot. I got this real ice cold thinking, if I was there, I would have to have given a statement, and then my mum and dad, because I'm underage, and then they would have been involved, and then they would have known that I was there, and oh my God. And so I just had this real icy kind of coldness running through me of fear, of thinking, if that had been, and then secondary was the fact that somebody was dead. I just had this pure primal fear of had I been there at that time? And then obviously you process it and you go, oh my God, somebody was shot dead, you know?
Mm-hmm. But so how did that impact on you going back?
I was nervous, but I've always been kind of like an old head on new shoulders. And I kind of thought, well, that's the only time, of every day on the news, somebody was shot dead or somebody was blown up, and that was the only time I'd ever heard of it being in the Parliament. Mm-hmm. So I kind of was able to weigh up and go, well, if that's a one-off, I should be safe enough. And then I was always on my guard the first few times, and I can remember the first times I went in for longer than just to walk in and walk out again, that I always was aware of where exits were in case anything like that happened, that I could run out, that I wouldn't have to give a statement. And then I got to the stage where then it was totally fine. I didn't worry, and I didn't need to worry. and an incredible time because I'd left special needs and I was doing performing arts and I'd moved up to Belfast, and I've always been so theatrical, surprisingly. I literally came out of my mother's womb looking for a top hat and a cane. You know what I mean? And sort of like, where's my light stick on Liza? And they didn't have any entertainment. They just had one straight female on a Saturday afternoon in the Parliament who did karaoke from 1 to 5. And if she was sick, there was no karaoke, right? So they didn't have like gay entertainment, and there was no internet, and there was no guidebook as to like what gays do or how gays behave. So I had gone down to Dublin for a trip with some friends, and we had seen this drag show. We were like, wow, drag queens. And the thing was, back then, people like Lady Bunny and RuPaul were sometimes on things like Ricky Lake, and Amanda Lepore would be on those types of shows. And they're like, well, these drag queens are like, this is amazing. And you'd see them all pop up on those types of those types of chat shows. So there was, in the back of my head, I was like, this is a thing, but I didn't really know what it was and how you would do it, and never contemplated that I would be a drag queen. So we were in Dublin, we saw this drag show, and like, why don't we do it? Like, we need to do this? Like, we need to dress up and we need to perform. And there was one guy had done it gone out to the bar a couple of times. And then another, when I met my first boyfriend, he introduced me to his set of friends, and it was amazing because that's where I had my first wine, and I had like a nice night where people just all sat round and were gay together and chatted, because I'd only ever been with my girlfriends before, and they were straight, and that was all fine. So it was a lovely experience. And one of them had done drag in a competition, like for Halloween and a talent thing. People didn't do drag to like entertain. It was like for an event. So if it was like a birthday party, they got dressed up. If it was Halloween, they got dressed up. But it wasn't in the consciousness of to dress up and entertain. And there was one drag queen who is still going, and she's doing about 50 plus years, even through the height of the Troubles. And she would do wee fundraisers, and she would get dressed up in drag, and she's raised over £70,000 in all of that time so she occasionally DJ'd, but didn't have like a regular thing. They would just occasionally book her and get her to dress up. But there wasn't like here's a drag queen, come on a Tuesday and you've got like Portia doing whatever. So we went to the bar and said, could we do a night? And they were kind of like,
but hang on. So how many friends went to Dublin?
So there was three of us.
And all three of you were like, yeah, let's do drag.
No, there was a few of us that went to Dublin. One of them was in a dance troupe, and then the captain of the dance troupe was a bit older than us, and he's the one who had done drag a couple of times. So it kind of like the dots lined up, like the triangle lined up, as in like we had experienced this. Here was somebody that was just starting to do it, and he had sort of said, why don't you guys start to do it? And the guy who was in the dance troupe with him did it a couple of times before I did. And then the three of us all came together and just created magic and set up. So they said to us, they were a bit skeptical, and they were like, well, men dress up as women on the bar. We'll give you a Sunday night, because nothing happened on a Sunday night. So they had 9 people in the bar the week before we started. And then we started this show, and it was a split level. So there's 2 floors, and they only opened the nightclub on a Friday and Saturday night. So by week 4, it was so busy and so jam-packed that they had to move us to the nightclub. And it was there for about a year and a half. And their Sundays became as busy as their Saturday nights. And sometimes it would eclipse because there was entertainment. So then what we started to do was like a pub quiz night and a karaoke night. And when you were doing karaoke, it was all on cassette tape. All my shows now are on my phone. I can literally rock up and hand the DJ my phone, stick on that playlist. I'm ready to rock and roll. Whereas back then it was like cassette tape. So you would play and stop your song and then fast forward to the next one, play and stop, so that the DJ had all the different cassettes lined up, and they all had to be in order, because you couldn't rewind or pause because you can't really play. You couldn't really pre-listen.
And did the machine ever chew the tape on you?
Fuck, I'm sure it probably did, but that was just like, what of it.
Oh, well.
And I do remember like this guy, and he was called Paul, and he always had his pencil on his pens. He's always starting doing this here with all of his, because he's winding up the reels. And then for karaoke, they were on videotape. So it's funny now because you can almost age somebody by when you say you do karaoke, because I host a karaoke night now, and they would say, have you any books? Whereas there's a certain generation that it doesn't even enter their mind to ask for a book. They just know that it'll be on, the DJ will have it. But the reason why they had the karaoke books back then was because if you wanted I Will Survive, it would be tape 7, like 45 minutes in. So tape 7, number 43, Donna Summer, you had to fast forward to whatever the time was. And if the tapes weren't rewound, then it was a nightmare, because before you started the show, you might have 10 videotapes that were sitting there. It was playing, stop, fast forward, rewind. And then those nights, they started to become busy during the week, and people would go to it during the week, which they didn't have they never had anything happening during the week. So Tuesday nights and Thursday nights and Friday nights, they had people in the bar that they didn't before. And that's when there was this real sense of, I had my first sense of real community and belonging, because before that I had been bullied at school. I had only had girlfriends, and they were great fun. Nobody really else knew that I was gay, and I wasn't allowed back into working in the special needs school because the principal had found out that I was gay. And then here I was in the middle of all these people, and we were all having these wonderful experiences together. And you would sometimes see them in the town, they'd wave and smile. And I was doing performing arts at college, and I was dancing and performing in the bar and doing shows in the bar. And I felt like I belonged for the first time. Like, I felt like outside of your family, where you just feel like you belong anyway, but I felt like these were my people. And it was the first time that I'd ever felt like this real sense of like love and joy and being protected. And also things like, there was the female, the toughest female football group of the time, and their name was the Predators, because literally they would go on to a football pitch and everybody else would just run, right? So on the pitch, they were as hard as nails, but they would come into the bar and they were like kittens, and that I'd sit in their knee, and they were all hugs and kisses, and they had the best time ever. And I can remember one of them, I was in a rented house, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but one of them came around and fixed like something that had broken, and then seen that I had like a light that wasn't quite right, and then she fixed. But then I kind of thought, well, isn't that lovely that someone that I've only met in a bar, and it was this real sense of anything that you need that somebody else has, we're here for you, because we're basically all in together. We are our own family, because a lot of people who, especially older than me, once they had come out, they didn't have a family. So this bar was their family, and people were aware of this, and they looked out for each other. So even now, when I'm in the bar, that's what I try to create. I try to create this real sense of harmony, and there's nobody cooler when I'm on than anybody else. I make a point of going to everybody and speaking to everybody and making everybody feel this. And that the nice thing is, that's what our bar gets the feedback from. It's a very sense of like everyone feels safe, because I try to recreate the vibe of that, what I learned, and give that to other people.
And so let's cycle back to your first time in drag, because you kind of like started a drag family quite organically, quite quickly.
Yeah.
And this was also at a time when there wasn't a million YouTube tutorials on how to do makeup.
Oh, there was nothing? No.
So how did you what was that first time? Did you all come together in a room and like do each other's makeup, or how did it start?
No, it was funny because let me go back. So Jerry and Gordon were in the dance troupe. So they were already doing routines and stuff like that. Then they started doing like little bits and pieces. I was very ballsy and loved dressing up, and Trudy was a fashion student. So she would make these really extravagant things, and I would just wear them out and be like, yeah, whatevs, like I'm totally wearing this out. So that's how organically the three of us all came together. Two were already in that dance troupe, and then I was friendly with Trudy through arts, through the college, and then that's how and then we all kind of just clicked and worked and thought, right, well, there wasn't.
But you weren't the Jerry Halliwell of the group, were you? You weren't the one that couldn't dance, that everyone was like, oh.
Oh, I was totally the Jerry Halliwell of the group.
No.
Yeah.
So stressful.
I was, yeah, completely, because you have to remember the two of them were in a weekly 70s. It was called the Groovy Train, and they had all these really big extravagant routines, and they were all bopping, and I didn't have any experience. So even when it came to rehearsals, they would go through it twice. And then they'd be like,
that's it. Let's go.
And then I was like, I still don't know the steps. So I was always a kind of like side-eyed and like 2 beats behind everybody else, you know. But it was you know, I think back then people didn't care as much as they would probably care now. And a lot of my work that I do solo, so that I don't have to learn dance routines.
No one knows if I messed the step up because there's no one else doing it.
Because it's just me. Yeah. I've been traumatized. Yeah, so that's how we all came about, and then approached the bar, and we didn't all sit down and go like, "What's your look going to be? What's your look going to be?" Because we were three incredibly different, and we were drag characters organically. So I came at it. I was a Real Housewife before the Real Housewives were ever a thing. I had my own long blonde hair. So I was an affluent housewife who married my first husband for the title, which is why I'm Lady. Every other husband after that, I married for their money. And I had 2 children in boarding school who I only see at Christmas, and the nanny looked after them. And I always wore pearls and very chic kind of high street clothes, and I looked like I was fishy realness before, again, that was even a term. The other one, who was the art student or the fashion student, was very quirky and very kind of like avant-garde. And then there was another one who was kind of a very local Belfast kind of like, here, all muckers together, and a girl from down the road. So, and then she would wear these really like extravagant like ball gowns and everything, and sequins, and you know, so none of us ever blurred the lines between each other's characters, because we were three very individual. Whereas now I tend to find when drag queens are coming along or baby draggers are coming along, they're trying to be somebody that they've seen. So I think the lovely thing is we had the creativity to be 100% our authentic selves and what felt natural to us, because we weren't influenced by anything else. So I wasn't trying to be, I was trying to be the housewives that I knew, that I thought they were just so glamorous and so wonderful. That's the only thing I was trying to emulate, but I wasn't trying to emulate another drag queen to be a certain way, or even, and then when it came to makeup, like, Jesus, nobody had a clue how to do makeup.
Oh yeah, so like, were you supporting each other with makeup, or was it just like...
It was funny because there used to be a wee guy that came to the show, and he loved it. And he was a wee closeted straight guy, but he was also a shoplifter. So he used to always shoplift us three of everything, so that we wouldn't argue. And they would come to like the side of the stage and be like, "There you are. There's a wee bag. They have everything. Don't be fighting." And then he would always get us bits and pieces of makeup. And then we would just be practicing and trying it out. And like anything, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And I never wanted anybody else to do my makeup, because one of the other ones used to get somebody to do their makeup all the time. But I was like, this is now becoming a regular thing, and if they're not always available and I can't do it, so I want to try to build it myself. So I end up being
a control freak after my own heart.
Yes, I ended up working as the first nail on a cosmetics counter in Belfast, because I was doing a show in Boots, like for children in need, for a charity event, and the area manager seen me and was like, "Oh my God, I think you'd be great to come and work on the counter." So I got the job, and I thought, well, I'll do it for about 6 months, and I'll be able to get free makeup, and I'll know how to put on eyeshadow. And that led into like a real flourishing career. I worked for the company for about 6 years, And then I did all of their events around the UK and Ireland, and all the training and all the new product launches and stuff. And became really good at it. And then I became a very successful makeup artist for televisions and weddings. And at one point, you couldn't book me during the wedding season, and sometimes I was doing like 2 weddings back to back. And then I ran the cosmetics cancer charity as well throughout all of that. So it was an amazing stepping stone, because I'm always a great believer in everything happens for a reason. And I would never have thought about working in cosmetics. Only I was in Boots, the shop, which is like a cosmetics stores for anyone that isn't, or it's kind of like a pharmacy store that has a cosmetics hall. So that's why I was in there, and they were fundraising for a charity event. Otherwise, who knows where I would have been, or what my other career would have been. So that led into me learning how to do makeup, and then over time we got better at doing it ourselves.
And so the 3 of you, do you remember your first performance?
Yes. So I did. I've been to Paradise, but I've never been to Me, Charlene.
Classic. Yeah, classic.
And I also, because I love Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and then I also did. We had to do 2 numbers, and then I also did Cher, Strong Enough.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and then we had a big group number, which I can't remember what our first finale number was. We did a number each, played a game, and it was Gay Your Cards Right. So it was Play Your Cards Right, but we called it Gay Your Cards Right. And we had the big screen and the big playing cards, higher, lower, and all that type of thing. And then we would do another number each, and then a finale number, and that was the show.
And what was the feeling when that show was over?
It was because we'd been rehearsing for a while, and we'd been talking about it for a while, and I was going out and doing like little bits and pieces here and walking about in drag, and like half the time, because I had my own long blonde hair, everyone thought I was a woman anyway, right? So I'd be walking around the place half the time in a form of drag, and people just thought that I was a woman. This is during the day, so it was just nuts. You wouldn't get away with it. Well, you probably would get away with it now, but like people just didn't think to check, because they saw you. People back then seen what they believed. So if they seen this woman walk down the street, they would never even have comprehended that was actually a man walking down the street that was dressed like a woman. I remember once my house would be the party house, because I was very close to where the bar was. People would come back to my house and we'd have parties, and they would go on all day and all night. And then people would start to sober up. And I lived on a flashpoint area. And that meant that you had Catholics on one side, Protestants on the other. And when they fought or rioted, then we were like the flashpoint, no man's land, where they would fight. So I lived in a private square, and there was one way in and one way out. So if they were rioting at the front of the square, we couldn't get out the back, because they used the back alley where they kept all of their kind of like mortars and petrol bombs and all that type of thing. So people were at the house. Everyone was starting to sober up. There was no alcohol. It was a Sunday. And I was like, don't worry, I'll go out to the shop. So I kind of like zhushed up my hair, and I put on like this like wee sweetheart neckline, black top, a wee black jacket, and then like these black flowy trousers, a bit of lipstick, walked through the middle of them, right, as fucking bold as brass, walked through the middle of all these big rough riders who were killing each other. And it was like the parting of the Dead Sea, because a woman had arrived, and they didn't think to question at all that this was a man. So it was like the parting of the Dead Sea. I walked through the middle of all of the riders, walked around to the shop where it was like a mace that had an off license and food. And the girl behind the counter was a lesbian, and she knew me, and she literally shit herself. And she came over and she was like, oh my God, because then the off license there was filled with rioters, because they were all getting their drink for the riots. And I'm in there just going, what wine will I choose? And what would be a nice one for this? And, and I just basket, and I'll get beers, and I'll get this. So she came over and she's like, right, don't you open your mouth. don't you speak. I'll open the till whenever you're ready. And I said, that's fine, no worries. So I got everything that I had to get, and I went over to the till, and she took the money, and I didn't have to speak, because probably speaking would have given it away. And I went back down through the middle of all the riders. They all separated, and I had this wee kind of like black bra on, and I kind of thought, oh, do you know what? They've been very gracious. Give them a wee flash. So I literally, once I got to my gate, I just turned around and I lifted my top. But again, I just had a wee black bra on, a wee padded bra. So they didn't see that there was nothing there, and they were all going, yo, and they were all cheering. Then I went in through my back gate. We boarded up the back gate, and with literally arms of drink. And I was like, the party continues. All is great.
Okay, so quick follow-up question.
Yeah.
Would you do that today?
No, probably not. Because
Yeah,
I would know I would know in advance to stock my house full of drink.
Oh, good forward planning. Yes, I'm a fan.
Uh-huh.
But so, like, this rioting, is it basically just people getting drunk and like looking intimidating?
Well, it's kind of like, it's kind of like it was starting to filter out, like peter out. Whenever I was there for about, in that house for about 8 or 9 years, and probably for the first 5 or 6, it was really bad. But then after that, it kind of, and now it's not that bad. It was kind of like a territory kind of, we're right, you're wrong, we're right type thing. And then they would just fight. And then it's funny, they never really fought in bad weather. It was always around good weather. And sometimes I just sort of thought, I think they almost were like, well, we've been doing this for years, we might as well keep up the tradition, that type of way. And sometimes you wouldn't even know what they were around. Sometimes they would riot if something had happened. So say like one side felt they were wronged, but it could have been in a completely different community. Then they would have all come out and fought, or vice versa. Or maybe something happened, or maybe the police had said something to the wrong person, or, and then all of a sudden they would come out, and it would be 2 or 3 days. Also, I remember, because I was the back of the square, and then there was like riot season. So during the 12th of July marching season is known as riot season, because they'd be marching, and if they marched through certain areas, and there would be riots and all this. So because I was along the back of the square, you couldn't see from the street. So the army tanks would park up there, and what I would do was, and they would sometimes be there for 3 or 4 days at a time, in case a riot broke out, that they could jump into action. So I used to put my stereo on the windowsill of my living room, and I would go out at night and do shows for the army. And do you know the way they've got those big army tanks have the floodlights? So I would dance between the armored tanks, like along the street, and each one would put the spotlight on, and it was kind of like my spotlight. And people in the street would make them lunch and make them cups of tea, and 3 or 4 houses might go, well, we'll take them, because maybe eight in a tank, and we're like, we'll make tea for this tank, and you make tea for that tank, and here's some sandwiches, here's some biscuits, here's Marcus out to dance up and down the street for you. You know what I mean? So,
and did you flash them as well?
No, I didn't flash them, but I did do cartwheels. So I did.
Oh, that's impressive.
Yeah. So, and it was funny as well, because I was so feminine as well, that there was a time that somebody was trying to break into the back of the house, and I had friends upstairs, and we were a mixed house. So we were at college, and we were there because it was cheap, obviously, because you're on a flashpoint area, and so it's the only place that we could afford. And somebody was trying to get in to break through the house to get away from the police. So everybody started to really panic. And I had this Japanese long dressing gown that my brother had got from Chinatown, from somewhere on his travels. And I had like these black trousers, and just a black vest top. And I very quickly stuck a pillow up my jumper, and I took my hair out, and then I just pleaded with the guy not to come in. And I said that I was in my very late stages of pregnancy, and it was really bad. It had been a really bad pregnancy, and that I was very worried, and that he was frightening me. And if I just kept the lights off, would he be happy just to hide out in the back garden until the police left? And he said yes. And literally, and he left his cigarettes and roll-ups there and came back 3 days later, knocked the door and goes, "Here, I think I left my rollies out your back." And he came back for them.
Oh, wow. Why would you just write it off? Write it off. Just
Yeah,
forget
I know.
about it.
Yeah. Mm.
So let's go back to the Parliament.
Yes.
And let's talk about boys and snogging. And
oh my goodness. So it was amazing because I had my first public like snog there, and I remember going out with my barber because I was wearing my school uniform into the barber shop, and he was gay, and I was like, oh my god, there's another gay person, so exciting. He cuts hair and he's got highlights and he's got a vest top and he's got piercings and he's really camp, and oh my god, I just think he's amazing. So he went to the same school that I did, and he happened to see my uniform. So then we struck up this little bit of a friendship, and I would always go in there and get my hair cut by him, and he was called Ricardo, and he was very he was just so cool. And then whenever I left school and he said, did I want to go up? He was going out one night to the Parliament, and my mum and dad were away for the weekend. And because I was a very sensible child, like my friends and I were in like drama groups together. So we didn't go out and stand on street corners and drink cider. We had wine and cheese parties and got the finest wine. And oh, darling. And then we would watch Sunset Beach, which was an American soap opera when Channel 5 was out. And it was 5 hours. So we'd have Sunset Beach wine parties. So mum and dad knew that it wasn't really like, and obviously I was quite flamboyantly gay. So it wasn't really like I was going to have girls out and get them pregnant. And I didn't give them any form of concern. So they had gone away. And I think I was sort of like 17 and I was in the house then on my own. So I had a free night. So Ricardo took me up for a proper night where I was able to stay out. Because before that, I had only gone in and kind of walked around. I had never actually got to go as a full night. And I ended up getting off with this guy, and he was really tall and he was really masculine, and he looked a bit like Buzz Lightyear, but before Buzz Lightyear was even this big jaw and everything. And then I remember he was so tall, and I still see him now. And I think he's in his 70s now. So I do. And he still has that real handsome look about him. But it was amazing because then we snogged and snogged and snogged and snogged, and then we ended up in the toilet cubicle, and nothing dramatic happened. It was just kind of like we both kind of like had our willies out and stuff like that there. And I was like, this is what your mom's going, this is amazing, it's great. So and then we went back out.
So your first
Oh no, I'd had other little dalliances. I remember being at Bible camp and getting off with one of the wee guys in Bible camp, and was sort of like rubbed up and down each other. So I had experience of like, but this was my first time out in a bar where we then, and it wasn't really a secret, and it wasn't really, so then we left the cubicle, we snogged and bumbled for a bit, and then we went back out and danced and snogged for the rest of the night. And then I had to go back down to, I had to go back home because my parents obviously were coming back the next day. They were coming back on a Sunday. And
then never again.
With him, I'm trying to think. I think we maybe had like a couple of wee snogs every so often, but nothing really that major. And with him again, but whenever I went there, it was nice because I used to get a snog all the time. You know, whenever you're sort of like you have your youth, and either you'll snog anything or you're more attractive to people. I don't know.
A little from column A, a little from column B.
Yeah. So I wasn't that fussy back then. And it was great because what I would do, because I'm still like this, I'm a great bottom line it. You know, I don't care about the faff, or, you know, tell me the information that you need me to know, and then I will give you an answer, and then that's it, right? So but I've always been very like that, is like, just get straight to the point. So my chat up line used to be, I would walk up to people and I would go, are you single? And they'd be like, yeah. And I'd be like, do you want to snog? And then they'd either say yes or no. And if they said yes, we would start snogging. So you didn't have to worry about small talk. You didn't have to worry about like having a drink and that awkward sort of like
or having
moment
to
of like,
buy them a drink.
Yeah. And then the thing is, if you snog and you get that out of the way, automatically you're comfortable in each other's company. So you can go to the bar and you can get a drink and you can snog while they're getting you your drink and you can snog while you're drinking it. Whereas if you don't do that initial kind of let's get the sort of elephant out of the room, then it's always going to be there. No one quite knows when to do it. So just bottom line it. And if they said no, I'd be like, oh well, it's your loss, and then I would move on to somebody else.
But is there not something? Oh, is it? I mean, like, yeah, I'm totally down for this kind of straight up. Like, let's just get it. Let's just do it. But is there not something kind of exquisite about that awkwardness?
I don't know. I'm not a fan of awkwardness, so I was just like, right, let's get the awkwardness out of the way, and if it works, we'll have a drink, and we're more relaxed in each other's company.
Oh, I quite enjoy that. Like, oh, let's just kind of let this see what happens, and let me just hang out here in this discomfort.
I think what it is, I never really know. Not obviously, I do know how to make them first move because obviously that's my chat up line. But if it gets past a certain point, then when do you do it? And then they're maybe thinking the same, and then he hasn't made a move. I haven't made a move. Is he not into me? Does he think I'm not into him? And then you get this kind of like, no one really knows what to do, that type of thing. So let's get straight to the goods, and then we can enjoy the merriment after that.
But how often did it happen where you had like this really good snog, and then you were like, okay, well, let's go and have a drink, and then let's talk. And then they talked, and you were like, oh God, you're boring.
Well, the thing is, it would like a drink, and then because at that time you don't really care, so you have a drink with somebody, and you're like, man, okay, move on to somebody else. And then now I wouldn't even think of one because of just who I am, and I wouldn't really snog in public, so I wouldn't really snog because I work in the media as well, so I don't really snog openly in bars, and usually the bars I work in the bar, so I hate that whole gossip and all that type of thing. So back then, it wouldn't even have fazed me to have snogged 3 or 4 different guys in the bar in the same night at different ends of the bar. Now I would be horrified if I even snogged one. And that's how I kind of know I'm drunk. And it's funny because the bar staff always know, because I don't really go out that much and drink, because I drive to all of the gigs, and I would never, ever, ever in drag ever kiss anybody or have sex with anybody in drag. It's totally not my thing at all. So if I'm ever out as a guy, then then it's, I think I get past a certain point, and because you've the drinks in and the wits out, and then the bar staff know if I actually snog anybody, they'll be like, oh, Portia's blocked. Portia's drunk because she's just snogged somebody in the bar.
Okay, so the burning question I have is, what was your strike rate?
I think it was maybe like 1 in 5 said no.
Oh wow, that's good.
Yeah, that's because I think also you disarm people, and then you go, because you say, "Would you like a snog?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, okay." They didn't really have time to think yes, no, or indifferent. And if they say no, and it was so funny because I can remember once saying to this guy, and I said, "Look, do you want a snog?" And he goes, "Oh, I have a boyfriend." And I goes, "I don't care." So then he was like, "Oh, okay." So then him and I started snogging, and then his boyfriend came over and joined in the snog as well. And I was like, "Oh my God, can 3 people kiss at once? This is a new experience." I didn't even think this was possible, but I'm not disliking it.
Oh, see, so how do you do it so it is pleasurable for all 3 people? Because I always find it super awkward.
Oh, I love it. I love 3-way snogging.
But
I don't know if there's a trick or a technique to it.
Okay. So there's not like, you don't have to have your nose in a certain position. Or...
No. It's kind of like, if you think of it, it's like 3 sides of a triangle. And then kind of like tongues are going into different spaces and places, and, so there's not one tongue that's the dominant tongue. All 3 are like, it's like little moles and one of those things that you're like whack-a-mole.
A whack-a-mole.
So one's in, one's out, one's in, one's out.
Is it not more like hungry hippos?
That might be a bit dangerous if there's 2 different mouths chattering at you.
Well, I mean, there's balls in that game as well. So
yeah.
Okay, I'm taking it.
But it was so funny because on that particular chat up line, I met my first ever boyfriend, and I was in the bar, And I was sitting at the bar chatting away and having great fun. And I was sitting on, well, this is what he tells me, that I was sitting under a light and Madonna's song, Beautiful Stranger, was on. And whatever way I was sitting, I was just perfectly lit. And he walked into the bar and he heard Beautiful Stranger, and he walked up and down the bar twice to catch my eye. And then on the second or third time that he walked down, he caught my eye. And you know that kind of like eye goes, hi, how are you? Hi. And then, but I was chatting to somebody at the bar. So then a while later on, he came out of the toilets, and I was in this little sort of corner, and he walked past and he caught my eye again, and I caught his eye. So, but this time he was actually walking past me. So I just did are you single? And he was like, yeah, actually I am. And I said, would you like a snog? And he goes, yeah, I'd love a snog. So then we started snogging up against the wall, and he had a bottle of beer in his hand, and he let go of the bottle of beer and it smashed behind me so that he could have both arms to embrace me. And I remember at the time thinking, not lovely. He's just dropped his drink just so that we can snog better. And we went out for a few years. And it was funny because I lived out of the city. He lived out of the city. And I would go, when I was training in special needs, my college was in the city. So we would meet up in the Parliament because it was a restaurant as well. So we would meet up there on a Tuesday because that was my in college training day. So we would have lunch together and be able to hold hands and snog and stuff.
And like in the middle of the day in a city like Belfast, that's massive, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Indeed, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, do you remember hearing about the Parliament closing?
We left the Parliament before it closed as the Parliament, because they got, like anything, people get very greedy. So the owners were seeing us as a cash cow, and they were making a fortune of money. So, for example, we had to put out our own tables and chairs. So it was in the dance, that like the nightclub, and they would make us put out our own seats and tablecloths and tea lights, and then we had to clear away the seats, tables, and chairs. Could you imagine saying to drag queens now, yeah, we've organised a show for you, but you have to put the tables and chairs out first? They'd be like, fuck you way off. I'll go to somewhere else. But we had to do that. Then they got this sponsor, and we never saw any money. And we were paid this really pittance wage, which we never got put up, because even though we had moved upstairs. And back then you didn't really collate, like, you guys are lifting thousands of pounds and you're literally giving us 60 quid a head, you know, and you now have a sponsor who's giving you free drinks. And we were meant to have a bottle of alcohol to give away each week, and which was given to them for free. They kept that and put that into stock and profits, you know. So it got to the point where we decided just to leave, and we were allowed to up our wages because we sold raffle tickets to get in to play the game of Get Your Cards Right. So it was we would come out and do some cabaret and do some stand up on the mics in an agony aunt section. Then we would take a break and sell the raffle tickets to see who was going to play Get Your Cards Right. So it meant we were allowed to keep that money minus a fiver, because that had to go into the jackpot, which was fine. So then we split up whatever was like our tips. But it got to the point where we were putting like the fiver in every week, and they weren't banking it. So they weren't like putting it in the pot, and they were just keeping it. And then it got to the point where it rolled over and rolled over and rolled over. And sometimes it was at £100, £150. Then they would go, right, you're going to have to just start paying the jackpot out of your own winnings. We're not paying it anymore. And then it was kind of like, right, well, you're making a fortune off the back of us. The prize that you actually have to give away, you're keeping, and you're making us, even though we pay for the prize, you're making us pay that all in one go out of our wages. And then we were just like, nah, sorry.
Did you ever go to the Parliament? Well, if you did, I would love for you to reach out to me over social media and share any photos or anecdotes or stories that you have. You can find me under the user handle KAndersonMusic on most platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the usual. And you can also find out more about Lady Portia by following her on Instagram under the username LadyP&Me. Lost Spaces is not only a podcast, but a concept record as well. I've been writing songs about queer venues and the people who used to live their lives there, and will be releasing songs over the next year. You can hear the first song, Well Groomed Boys, which is also playing underneath my talking right now on all streaming platforms. If you like this episode, I would really appreciate if you subscribed, left a review on Apple Podcasts, or just told people who you think might be interested too. I am Kay Anderson, and you have been listening to Lost Spaces.